Now, Congressman, always great to see you. Congressman Guy Reschenthaler.
Good to be on.
You got it.
Thanks.
Let's bring our panelists in now. We've got former Georgia Congressman Jack Kingston joining us live, and Republican strategist and host of the 13-minute News Hour, Bobby Eberle. Good to see both of you here. Jack, I want to start with you on this. Just your overall thoughts on the congressman, what he had to say about this impeachment. He doesn't think that there'll be witnesses. He does believe that many want this thing to go ahead and wrap up. Your thoughts?
I think he's right. I think people do see it for what it is. It's political theater. It's a kangaroo court. Nowhere in the world would you have a judge as a member of a jury who's already made up his mind. There's no due diligence. There's no true cross-examination. And now they're even actually changing the premise of their trial to say that Trump incited this because of a speech, and now they're going back and saying it was pre-planned. Well, you can't have it both ways. So the thing is a charade, but what the congressman was so correct about is all you have to do is look at last year. What were we doing at the same time? Instead of preparing for coronavirus, we were doing impeachment. So it is an absolute distraction. Some of it is not even on purpose. It's just that the Democrats are so obsessed with their hatred and fear of Donald Trump that this is all they can do. But just think about last year. Instead of doing impeachment, had the Democrats spent resources and time getting ready for coronavirus, what a different world we would have had in 2020.
Bobby Eberle, your thoughts on that? I got about 40 seconds for you.
Yeah, well, I would agree with mostly what the congressman said, except for the fact that, yes, it is a distraction. But I think what the Democrats are doing after the election, they are emboldened to actually destroy President Trump and the Trump legacy. They want to go after the president, the former president. They want to go after his supporters. We see this in saying that Trump supporters need to be deprogrammed and things like that. I think a lot of this impeachment trial, they know that the facts aren't there. The president is not even in office. It's not constitutional. But they are doing this not only to distract from the agenda, but to hammer home that Trump is a bad guy and his supporters are bad people. That's the primary objective here.
All right, we'll leave it right there. A lot to talk about. These are our panelists for this hour. Stick around, Jack, Bobby. We'll see you in just a bit.
All right, that's the new CDC director now saying that 2 masks are better than 1, and they can reduce infection of coronavirus by nearly 95%. Joining us to discuss is emergency room physician Dr. Ron Elfenbein of First Call Medical Center in Maryland. Doctor, good to see you. And our panelists, Jack Kingston and Bobby Eberle, also standing by. Great to see everyone here. Potentially you brought more than 1 mask to today's program. You might need it. I want to talk to you, doctor, though, about this topic. The CDC is saying there's now science to prove that 2 masks are better than 1, of course, leading many to wonder, where was this information initially, and where did this data come from, and what's your medical advice when it comes to mask wearing?
Yeah, well, first of all, good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's very confusing for people, and there's been, they've been reversing themselves. They started out saying, you didn't need a mask, then they said you do need a mask, then they said N95s are no good, then they said N95s are good. I think that leads to some credibility problems with these institutions, and it leads people to not necessarily trust these institutions, which is unfortunate for obvious reasons. But it's obviously not intended that way. And I think as science changes and evolves, new things come out, and this happens to be one of them. Now, you asked a really good question, is what is the science behind this? And so the CDC just came out with this recommendation with regards to the 2 mask policy because they did a study, and the study was inherently flawed because they did it on dummies. So they took dummies and they basically put different kinds of masks on them, and they measured when they would supposedly cough or sneeze what was coming out and what was registered on the other side. So they had a dummy with a mask on, and they had another dummy, and they said, all right, this dummy's going to sneeze. What comes from dummy A and hits dummy B? And then they had both in masks, and they showed that, with only a disposable mask that most people have, it was roughly about a 42% decrease in the amount of stuff that was sprayed onto dummy B. If they put a disposable with a cloth on top of it, which is where this sort of new recommendation came from, they showed that basically you could have, if both of them were masked up, you could have up to a 95% decrease in basically in the exposure of droplets to both of them. But it's inherently flawed because people aren't dummies, and people don't operate like dummies. The dummy looks at each other. They don't turn their heads. They're in a very confined space. All these things are not necessarily how humans behave. So you asked me my medical opinion. I think the important take-home message here is that nothing's really changed with regards to who should wear a mask and when you should wear it. The other thing that's important is it should be tight fitting. So whether it's one mask or two masks, it should be tight fitting. So if you have just a regular surgical mask that we would wear like in the operating room, for example, you can buy those at Sam's Club and Costco and all over the place. Make sure there's a metal bar. You want to push the metal bar tight against your nose, and you want to kind of tuck the edges down and make sure that it's tight fitting all the way across your face.
Okay.
If you want to throw a cloth mask on top, great. But I think that the data is a little bit questionable here.
Okay, well, as soon as you said they're testing on dummies, I had a lot more questions. I do want to play for our viewers a soundbite from Dr. Fauci, kind of giving his statement on this topic of wearing two masks. Here's that.
The recommendation is not that you have to wear it. What the CDC is saying, that at minimum, wear a mask, okay? This is what they're saying. Make sure you wear a mask. So you wear a mask. Then you want it to fit better. So one of the ways you could do it, if you would like to, is put a cloth mask over, which actually here and here and here, where you could get leakage in, is much better contained.
Okay.
That's all they're saying.
All right, and that statement does kind of mimic what you were saying there, Dr. Alpenbein. I want to just jump to our panelists, though, to kind of get a non-medical perspective. Guys, Bobby, bear with me because, you know, I live in New York City, and I have noticed that some people choose to wear two masks when they're out and about. Personal choice, of course. But there are many, many Americans out there who are struggling to just sort of adapt to wearing one mask when they're out in public. Bobby, what do you make of this new study here and this new recommendation we're hearing from CDC officials?
Well, I was prepared, you know, while I was talking to the producer to actually come on with three masks because, I mean, if two's better than one, three's probably better than two. But I was afraid I was going to pass out. I mean, and Dr. Fauci earlier in the year, he actually gave an interview where he said, be careful about two masks because if it is fitting too tightly and you do sneeze, it's got to go somewhere. This could blow out the sides. I mean, that's not really protection. And again, one of the things that frustrates me about going to the CDC is they do these recommendations, but you really don't get to see the studies. You don't get to go in depth to see if it makes sense. Most people are going to read a paragraph and say, oh, this sounds good to me. But as your guest said, I mean, when you look at what's really going on, people move their jaws, they move their mouths, they're talking. The fit is not there. And so it doesn't make sense, especially as you see that cases and deaths are all going down. It's a downward trend now. And now we're supposed to put these 2 or 3 masks on. Doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, I've been following the reports of, again, this decrease in cases and deaths and hospitalization, which, of course, is welcome news. We are seeing more vaccinations being distributed across the country. Again, very positive news.
Okay, friends, thanks so much for watching. And before you go, please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell so you'll be notified. And here's a special video just for you so you can watch even more of the 13-minute news hour. And don't forget to check out GOPUSA.com for the best in conservative news and commentary. We'll see you next time.